Today we're going to read Chapter 2 of Imagine Heaven by John Burke. All of these videos are uploaded to my YouTube and my TikTok and saved to playlists under the title of the book. I'm also reading Dr. Dolittle at this time too. Imagine Heaven. This is a book I've read several times and I really am excited to be sharing it. Andy, could you get out of the way here, Andy? Chapter 2, Skeptical Doctors in the Afterlife. No light, no shadows, no nothing, Vicky explained. Kenneth Ring, a professor at the University of Connecticut, was conducting a study on the near-death experiments of blind people. Both optic nerves were so severely damaged, Vicky had never visually seen anything during her 22 years of life. As Vicky explains, a lot of people ask me if I see black. No, I don't see black. I don't see anything at all. And in my dreams, I don't see any visual impressions. It's just taste, touch, sound, and smell, but no visual impressions of anything. That is, until one fateful night at age 22. Vicky occasionally sang at a Seattle nightclub. Unable to catch a taxi after closing time, her only resort was to hitch a ride with two inebriated patrons in a van. Not surprisingly, they crashed. Vicky was hurled from the van and suffered a basal skull fracture and a broken back and neck. The next thing Vicky knew, she found herself above the scene of the accident, looking down at what she realized must be a crumpled-up van. Having never seen anything, as a blind person, Vicky recalls it was hard to adjust to, and seeing was scary at first. Then I liked it, and it was okay. I had trouble relating things to one another, what I was seeing and perceiving versus what I had touched and known. Vicky doesn't remember the ambulance ride to Harborview Medical Center, but the next thing she recalls is that she left her body again and floated up near the ceiling, from where she watched a male doctor and a woman working on a woman's body. I was quite tall and thin at that point, Vicky recalls, and I recognized at first that it was a body, but I didn't even know that it was mine initially. Then I perceived that I was up on the ceiling, and I thought, well, that's kind of weird. What am I doing up here? I thought, well, this must be me. Am I dead? She could overhear the doctors as they discussed their fear that possible damage to her eardrum could lead to deafness in addition to her blindness. Vicky tried to tell them that she was fine, but the doctors didn't respond. Vicky recognized her hair, which was down to her waist, and her wedding band, which had orange blossoms engraved on it. And I thought, is this my body down there? Am I dead or what? They kept saying, we can't bring her back, we can't bring her back. And they were trying to frantically work on this thing that I discovered was my body, and I felt very detached from it and sort of, so what? And I was thinking, what are these people getting so upset about? Then I thought, I'm out of here. I can't get these people to listen to me. As soon as I thought that, I went up through the ceiling as if it were nothing. And it was wonderful to be out there and to be free, not worry about bumping into anything. And I knew where I was going. And I heard this sound of wind chimes that was the most incredible sound that I can describe. Vicky experienced a sense of upward motion as she traveled through the ceilings of the hospital and up above the roof of the building itself. She had a brief panoramic view of the hospital roof below her, as well as the streets, the other buildings around the hospital, and the city lights. As Ring reports, she felt very exhilarated during this ascension and enjoyed tremendously the freedom of movement she was experiencing. Vicky noticed that she was fully herself and had a distinct form and a non-physical body she said was made of light. Then she found herself going up through a dark enclosure like a tube. She was being pulled up into this tube or tunnel head first. She had no fear as she found herself moving toward a pinpoint of light getting brighter and brighter. As she reached the opening of the tube where the light was, she heard sublimely beautiful and exquisitely harmonious music that she had heard earlier. It transitioned into songs of praise to God. As she reached the opening of the tube, she rolled out to find herself lying on grass. Trees and flowers and a vast number of people surrounded her. She found herself in a place of tremendous light, and the light, Vicky says, was something you could feel as well as see. Even the people she saw were bright. Everybody there was made of light, and I was made of light. What the light conveyed was love. There was love everywhere. It was like love came from the grass, love came from the birds, love came from the trees. It was incredible, really beautiful, and I was overwhelmed by that experience because I couldn't really imagine what light was like. It's still, well, a very emotional thing when I talk about this. Vicky goes on to explain this, that in this other world, she was welcomed by some acquaintances. As Ring notes, there are 5 of them. Debbie and Diane were Vicky's blind schoolmates who had died years before at ages 11 and 6, respectively. In life, they had both been profoundly retarded as well as blind, but here they appeared bright and beautiful, healthy and vitally alive. They were no longer children, but as Vicky phrased it, in their prime. In addition, Vicky reports seeing two of her childhood caretakers, a couple named Mr. and Mrs. Zilk, both of whom had also previously died. Finally, there was Vicky's grandmother, who had essentially raised Vicky and who had died just 2 years before this incident. Vicky relates, "I had a feeling like I knew everything. This place was where I would find the answers to all the questions about life, and about the planets, and about God, and about everything." Ring notes, as these revelations are unfolding, Vicky notices that now next to her is a figure whose radiance is far greater than the illumination of any of the persons she has so far encountered. Immediately, she recognizes this being to be Jesus. "I was real close to him," Vicky explains. "He actually hugged me, he embraced me, and I was very close to him. And I felt his beard and his hair. He actually enveloped me. That's the only word I can think of to describe it. He enveloped me with so much warmth and love, and his eyes were piercing eyes. It was like they permeated every part of me, but not in a mean way. It was like you couldn't lie about anything, and he just looked everywhere and he could see everything, yet I wanted to reveal everything to him. He communicated to her mind, 'Isn't it wonderful? Everything is beautiful here and it fits together. And you'll find that. But you can't stay here now. It's not your time to be here yet, and you have to go back.' Vicky reacted with extreme disappointment and protested vehemently, 'No, I want to stay with you.' The being reassured her that she would come back, but for now she has to go back and learn and teach more about loving and forgiving. 'But first, watch this,' he said. And what Vicky then saw was everything from my birth in a complete panoramic review of her life. And as she watched, the being gently commented to help her understand the significance of her actions and their repercussions. The last thing Vicky remembers once the life review had been completed are the words, 'You have to leave now.' She then experienced a sickening thud, like a roller coaster going backward, and found herself back in her body feeling heavy and full of pain. As a former skeptic, I would have had lots of counter-arguments forming in my head about now. It all seems too good to be true. Yet the testimonies of people like Vicky have convinced many skeptical doctors, professors, and researchers that life continues after death. Dutch cardiologist and researcher Dr. Pim van Lommel notes that Vicky's story and those of other blind people who have experienced NDEs are prompting researchers to reconsider the relationship between consciousness and the brain. Vicky's reported observations could not have been the result of sensory perception or of a functioning visual cerebral cortex, says van Lommel. Considering how many details of Vicky's story are verifiable, van Lommel notes, her reported observations clearly were not imagined either. For instance, Kenneth Ring, who is not a Christian, says, "We asked Vicky a number of probing questions about exactly how Jesus looked to her and how she could be certain of his identity. She described a bearded man with shoulder-length hair and piercing eyes, wearing a robe with a sash but barefooted, and she said brilliant light came out of him." Ring notes, on the one hand, Vicky, as a deeply religious person, even as a child, would certainly be familiar with descriptions of Jesus. On the other hand, she maintains that because of her blindness since birth, these descriptions never had formed any coherent pictorial image in her mind of Jesus. If we take her avowal not only to be sincere but truthful, the fact that her portrait of him accords so well with tradition is surely a puzzle worth pondering. Ring also points out several fascinating visual descriptions made by Vicky. First, during the life review, Vicky saw a playback of her earthly life with her two friends, Debbie and Diane. She was later able to describe to the researchers how her childhood friends looked and even walked. One moved with great difficulty. These were observations looking back on her childhood friends that Vicky could not have seen at that time but claimed to see in the life review. The researchers confirmed the observations with the house mother who raised all three of the girls. Ring also points out that when asked to describe the color of a flower, all she can say is, "It was different brightness, different shades. But I don't know because I don't know how to relate to color." He concludes, the fact that she was unable to discriminate colors in that heavenly realm and was also unable to do so in the physical world only adds plausibility to her account. Blind people claim to see, deaf people claim to hear, and in this new spiritual existence, before passing through the tunnel, many claim to see and hear what's happening in our world. The types of these things that they say and report display corroborative evidence, claims that can be checked out and verified. In Kenneth Ring's study published in 2008, he interviewed 21 blind people, 14 blind from birth, who reported having an NDE. He subjected his research to peer review, and the reviewers tended to agree on the main conclusions of the researchers that 1, the near-death experience is the same for sighted persons and blind or vision-impaired persons. 2, blind and visually impaired descriptions of the experience show visual or visual-like perceptions. And 3, some of these reports have been validated by outside witnesses. So, 4, there is preliminary evidence that the visual information can be corroborated. With the advent of modern medicine and superior resuscitation techniques, the prevalence of people being brought back from clinical death has soared. In 1982, a Gallup poll reported that 8 million people have had near-death episodes, according to the New York Times. In the 40 years since Moody coined the term, studies in the United States and Germany suggest approximately 4.2% of the population has reported a near-death experience, an NDE. That's 1 out of every 25 people, or nearly 13 million Americans. Skeptical medical doctors became some of the first researchers after Life was published. Dr. Michael Sabom is a cardiologist who heard a presentation on Moody's book but thought it was nonsense. None of the patients he'd resuscitated had ever conveyed such an imaginative story. Challenged by the presenter to ask his patients, he did. As he expected, most had nothing to report, except Jane. Dr. Sabom recalls, "When I asked Jane if she had any unusual experiences during these brushes with death, the tone of her voice fell reverent. Beneath her words rose powerful emotions. I became quickly aware that she was entrusting to me a story deeply personal. That story unfolded like the pages of Moody's book. I was flabbergasted, but tried to maintain a sense of professionalism as I listened. I started to believe there might be something to the stories that Moody reported. But all he had was a collection of stories. There was no science in his book. I decided to take the near-death experience to its next logical step. I wanted to see if it would pass scientific muster. It did. After 5 years of research, I published my findings in the book Recollections of Death. Dr. Sabom discovered hundreds of stories like Jane's when he began to sincerely ask. What convinced Dr. Sabom and other skeptical doctors of life beyond death were patients claiming they had left their physical body and observed their own resuscitation. Here was corroborative evidence, some verifiable, way to substantiate whether these tales were more than hallucination or reactions of a dying brain. Dr. Sabom records multiple stories like that of Pete Morton. Pete told me he had left his body during his first cardiac arrest and had watched the resuscitation. When I asked him to tell me what exactly he saw, he described the resuscitation with such detail and accuracy that I could have later used the tape to teach physicians. Pete remembered seeing a doctor's first attempt to restore his heartbeat. He struck me, and I mean he really whacked me. He came back with his fist from way behind his head and he hit me right in the center of my chest. Pete remembered them inserting a needle into his chest in a procedure that he said looked like one of those Aztec Indian rituals where they take the virgin's heart out. He even remembered thinking that when they shocked him, they gave him too much voltage. Man, my body jumped about 2 feet off the table. Before talking with Pete and scores like him, Sabom says, I didn't believe there was such a thing as near-death experience. These people, like Pete Morton, saw details of the resuscitation that they could not otherwise have seen. One patient noticed the physician who failed to wear scuffs over his white patent leather shoes during open heart surgery. In many cases, I was able to confirm the patient's testimony with medical records and with hospital staff. Suspecting familiarity with procedures as an explanation, Sabom went on to conduct a study comparing resuscitation descriptions of people claiming to have NDEs with a control group of seasoned heart patients. This type of study has now been duplicated multiple times with similar conclusions. In a 5-year prospective study of NDEs in the United Kingdom, Dr. Penny Sartori tested the good guesses hypothesis. She asked seasoned cardiac patients who did not claim to see their bodies to guess what happened during their resuscitation. Sartori reports, 28 of these patients were unable to even guess as to what procedures had been performed. 3 reported scenarios based on things they had seen in popular hospital dramas on TV, and 2 guessed about the scenario. All had errors and misconceptions of the equipment used, and incorrect procedures were described. Many guessed that the defibrillator had been used when in fact it had not. This contrasted significantly with the surprisingly accurate accounts made by patients who claimed to be out of their bodies and observing the emergency situation. Dr. Jeffrey Long, a radiation oncologist, read about Dr. Sabom's near-death research published in the prestigious Journal of the American Medical Association. He had never heard of such a thing, but as one who has to face death with cancer patients every day, he read Moody's book and was impressed by it, as well as by the work of other early NDE researchers. Still, he admits he was surprised by the lack of more extensive research, especially considering the fact that one of humankind's most pressing questions is whether there is life after bodily death. Just as Dr. Long began to wonder if he should pursue the study of NDEs himself, something happened that helped him decide. He and his wife went out for dinner with another couple. During dinner, their friend Sheila mentioned having severe allergies, so severe that she once had an allergic reaction during surgery and coded her heart stopped beating. Dr. Long decided to probe. He asked Sheila if anything had happened to her when she coded on the table. She responded immediately and empathetically, yes. And it was then that Dr. Long heard his first in-person near-death experience story. Immediately after her heart stopped, Sheila quietly explained, I found myself at ceiling level. I could see the EKG machine I was hooked to. The EKG was flatlined. The doctors and nurses were frantically trying to bring me back to life. The scene below me was a near-panic situation. In contrast to the chaos below, I felt a profound sense of peace. I was completely free of any pain. My consciousness drifted out of the operating room and moved into a nursing station. I immediately recognized that this was the nursing station on the floor where I had been prior to my surgery. From my vantage point near the ceiling, I saw the nurses bustling about, performing their daily duties. After I watched the nurses a while, a tunnel opened up. I was drawn to the tunnel. I then passed through the tunnel and became aware of a bright light at the end of the tunnel. I felt peaceful. After I passed through the tunnel, I found myself in an area of beautiful, mystical light. In front of me were several of my beloved relatives who had previously died. It was a joyous reunion, and we embraced. I found myself with a mystical being of overwhelming love and compassion. Do you want to go back? He asked. I responded, I don't know, which was just like my old indecisive self at the time. Sheila sensed the choice to return was hers. It was a most difficult decision. I was in a realm of overwhelming love. In this realm, I knew I was truly home. A day later, Sheila awoke in the ICU, wires and tubes protruding from her body. She found herself unable to talk about her profound experience. Later, after she returned to the floor where she'd been before surgery, she confided in one of the nurses who seemed shocked and even afraid to hear about Sheila's NDE. When a nun was sent to speak with Sheila about her experience, it was a Catholic hospital, the nun reacted negatively as well, declaring Sheila's NDE to be the work of the devil. From that point on, Sheila was extremely hesitant to share the details of her NDE with anyone. Dr. Long recalls vividly when Sheila finished her story, there was silence around the table. I remember thinking these experiences could change my views about life, death, God, and the world we live in. Since then, Dr. Long has collected and scientifically studied thousands of accounts from around the world, some of which we will explore in this book. Dr. Long's extensive study led him to conclude NDEs provide such powerful scientific evidence that it is reasonable to accept the existence of an afterlife. Numerous repeated cases in which someone is apparently unconscious in a hospital bed and reported seeing things they could not have seen from that bed prompted many doctors and professors to take these stories seriously. Kimberly Clark Sharp, a noted NDE researcher in Seattle, Washington, reported a case study in which a woman named Maria was rushed to the hospital with a severe heart attack. After successful resuscitation, Maria told Sharp about her near-death experience, including detailed out-of-body observations of her resuscitation. Then she went one step beyond. She claimed to travel outside the hospital, she said, where she observed a tennis shoe on the third-story window ledge of the hospital. Maria provided detailed information about the shoe. It was a man's shoe, she said, left-footed, and dark blue with a wear mark over the little toe and a shoelace tucked under the heel. Sharp went window to window on the hospital's third floor looking on the ledges. Finally, she found this shoe, exactly as Maria had described it. As Dr. Long points out, this account offers substantial evidence, despite the attempts of some skeptics to discredit it. The Lancet, one of Europe's most prestigious medical journals, published the account of a patient who had experienced cardiac arrest and was brought into the hospital comatose and not breathing. As a tube was placed in the patient's airway in order to ventilate him, it was noted by the medical staff that the patient wore upper dentures. The dentures were removed and tucked into the drawer of a nearby crash cart while the patient was in a deep coma. After resuscitation, the patient was moved to another room where he remained unconscious. A week later, the patient regained consciousness. When the nurse came in, he exclaimed, "Oh, that nurse knows where my dentures are." The nurse was very surprised as the patient explained, "Yes, you were there when I was brought into the hospital, and you took my dentures out of my mouth and put them onto that cart. It had all these bottles on it, and there was this sliding drawer underneath, and there you put my teeth." The nurse reported in the Lancet, I was especially amazed because I remembered this happening while the man was in a deep coma and in the process of CPR. When I asked further, it appeared the man had seen himself lying in bed, that he had perceived from above how nurses and doctors had been busy with CPR. J.M. Holden, a professor of psychology, studied 93 NDE patients who claimed to make multiple verifiable observations while out of their physical bodies. Of these out-of-body perceptions, 92% of these observations were completely accurate, 6% contained some error, and only 1% was completely erroneous. Many studies have now been done convincing many former skeptics that these people truly pass from death into some new state of existence. Miller notes the amount of scholarly, peer-reviewed literature now available since Moody wrote Life After Life. Over 900 articles on NDEs were published in scholarly literature prior to 2011, gracing the pages of such varied journals as Psychiatry, The Lancet, Critical Care Quarterly, the Journal for Near-Death Studies, American Journal of Psychiatry, British Journal of Psychology, Resuscitation and Neurology, the Handbook of Near-Death Experiences. It chronicles 55 researchers or teams who have published at least 65 studies of over 3,500 NDEs. Many have come to the conclusion there is life after death. Alternative explanations have been proposed over the years, but none make as much logical sense of the evidence as the simple conclusion: there is life after death. But what will life be like? Every experience is unique, and each should be filtered with a measure of skepticism. However, when thousands of people of all ages across the globe report the same core elements over and over, we need to consider what this means. There's a little fight on my farm just as I finished chapter 2, Imagine Heaven. It's kind of a deep book, you know, a little bit like, well, it's a scholarly book. It's like a college book almost. I really hope everybody's enjoying it so far. I gotta go check on my flock. Woo!